It is time for another episode of Council Bluffs Today. Hi, I am Todd Studer, and this is going to be a little different than normal. You know, most of the time if I'm here in this studio and I'm sitting in this chair or the chair is behind me, the purpose is to talk about someone else's story or business, someone else's organization or event, or something that's going on in the community that people need to know about. It's what this show's been built on from the very beginning, and it's about giving local people a place to talk about what they are doing and giving the rest of us a chance to see more clearly what's happening in this community in which we live. Today, I need to talk about what has happened, what it felt like when I found out, how quickly things fell apart, and then how quickly people started showing me what Council Bluffs is all about. All right, so a few days ago, you're aware, I found out that the recording equipment, cameras, computer, everything that I use to do this work, it had been stolen. Window was broken. Someone came in and took everything. You know, I'm saying that out loud right now, and it still feels a little bit strange because there's certain moments in life where your brain understands the words, but the reality, it just doesn't seem to catch up right away. You can know something's true. You just can't accept it emotionally, or you can be looking right at the evidence. I was standing in broken glass, and part of my mind was still trying to find a different explanation because the explanation that was right in front of me, it was too big. It was just too sudden and too unreal. Couldn't take it all in. That was where I was last Thursday. I could see cameras, computers, recording equipment all gone. I knew what I was seeing. I knew this was not just some kind of minor inconvenience or some little problem that could be fixed with a phone call. There was still part of me that just kept thinking, there's got to be some other answer. Maybe, I don't know, something been moved. I'd missed something. Maybe there was some explanation that would just make it all make sense. Everything would get back to normal. It was not normal. Nearly everything I owned was gone. And when that hit, it just kind of hit in layers. It wasn't just the recording equipment that was sitting in this room, and it was not just extra gear or something I could casually replace later. This was at the core of everything that it is that I do. Cameras, computer, tools, all the pieces that make it possible for these shows. There were things that allow me to sit across from people in Council Bluffs or elsewhere in Pottawatomie County and all around the region and have conversations that I believe matter. These were the tools that helped me tell the stories of local businesses and nonprofits and volunteers and community leaders, families, events, all the different causes and all the people who are trying to do something good where they live. When you look at it from the outside, you know, you may just see the cameras and lights and microphones, but for me, it all represented commitments and represented relationships and sponsors who believe in what I'm building and guests who trust me with their stories. And it represents the ability to just keep showing up. So when I say it was disbelief, it wasn't just about someone taking property. The disbelief was about realizing that one act could threaten the ability to keep doing the work. I had shows scheduled, and I had people counting on me. I had momentum. It had already taken a lot of work to build, and I had a daily rhythm. Didn't leave a lot of room for everything to suddenly stop. And in that moment, it felt like the whole thing had just been knocked sideways. I remember I was trying to take inventory in my head. I'm looking around piece by piece. Okay, that's gone. That's gone. That's still here. Why is that still here? Oh, that's gone. It was just too much to process. You know, you think about one camera and then another camera and then the computer and then other parts, the stands, cables, the whole setup works together. And with every item I realized was missing, the weight just seemed to get heavier. So the question in my mind wasn't only who would do this. Bigger question is how I'm supposed to keep things going. That was the part that landed the hardest. I've talked a lot on these shows about community. about supporting local businesses, about showing up for people, and about believing that positive local media still matters, and about the importance of paying attention to what is happening right here. And then, all of a sudden, I wasn't just the person telling those stories. I'm the person standing there. I'm going to need some help trying to figure out what comes next and trying not to let the whole thing overwhelm me. There's vulnerability in that. And I don't think I can completely explain exactly what that feels like. I'm used to being the one who says, come on in, sit down, tell me what you're doing. Let's get your message out. That's what I'm used to. I'm used to being the one trying to amplify other people. But in that moment, I was the one looking at empty spaces and broken glass and my ability to do that work. And I didn't know how quickly I could, or even if I'd be able to recover. I didn't want to rewrite that moment into something cleaner than it was. I was not immediately calm and I was not immediately inspired. I was not thinking, oh, someday this is going to make a great story about resilience. No, I was trying to understand what had happened, what was gone, what it meant, whether I was going to lose the ability to keep doing the work. Am I going to lose my business? But that's where the story starts. It started with disbelief. It started with that awful feeling of realizing that something had been taken, and not just something that I owned, but something I depended on. And it starts with the possibility that all of the work, all of the momentum, and all of the people who had been believing in what we're doing here, that it could be interrupted by one selfish act. Next 24 hours, that uncertainty was really hard. So after the first wave of disbelief, the next part was, I don't know. I think that may have been the hardest stretch of the whole thing, because when something like this happens, you're not only dealing with what happened in the past, you're dealing with every question it creates about the future. I didn't know whether I was ever going to see any of that equipment again. And in fact, I didn't think I would. I didn't know how long the investigation was going to take, and it is still going on. I didn't know whether I'd be able to replace what was gone, or whether maybe I can borrow enough gear to keep going. I didn't know. Am I going to have to cancel a few shows, several shows, figure out a completely different way to keep the business alive while I'm trying to rebuild everything? This is daily work. There's not a lot of room for a long pause. That is just some of the things about building something that people begin to count on. It's when it is working, that rhythm is powerful. As an audience, that this is going to be there. Sponsors know they're going to be represented. Guests know the show will continue to be a place where their message can get out. When something like this at this level goes wrong, that same daily rhythm becomes pressure, because the calendar doesn't care that all of my equipment had been stolen. Shows, they still needed to be produced. Sponsors still needed to be taken care of. Guests still needed to be respected. Commitments still exist. So I'm sitting with all that, and I'm trying to think through every possible option. Can I record with a phone? You saw me do it. Maybe it's not the quality that I have come to expect and that you've come to expect, and it's not the experience that I promised people who come to sit down with me. Could I borrow a camera? Maybe. But then what about everything else? Could I use a different computer? Maybe. But then what about the software and the workflow and the storage and the ability to edit and upload? Could I replace everything quickly? Not easily. This is not just some kind of hobby setup where I just grab one thing and everything's fine. Every time that I thought I had an answer to something, it just created another question. Hard part was all this happened while I was already in a season of rebuilding. I'd already been working to stabilize the business of everything that's going on here, keep the shows moving, keep sponsors served, and keep the audience growing, keep my focus on the work that matters. I was already trying to build a stronger foundation under everything. And then all the physical tools that I needed, they're all gone. So for about 24 hours, there was a very real question in my mind about how am I supposed to move forward? It wasn't in a dramatic way, just in a practical way. How do I produce a video show without cameras? How do I edit without a computer? How do I keep a local media business operating when all the tools are gone? How do I get to talk to you about the sponsors and the guests and do it in a way that doesn't sound like I'm just making excuses? How do I keep my own head clear enough to make decisions when every new thought seems to create another problem to solve? That was the loop. It's just going over and over and over. The one thing I know about myself is that my brain, it needs order. It needs a path. It needs to know the next step and then the next step after that and even the next step after that. So when that path disappeared, my mind was starting to try to solve every possible version of the problem all at the same time. It was exhausting. Those first few hours, no clean answers, only uncertainty. I thought about people who've sat across from me on this table behind me or in another studio here, whether it was on Council Bluffs today or on Potawatomi County Roots. I thought about the responsibility that comes with giving those local voices a place to be heard. I thought about sponsors who have supported the shows not just because of advertising, it's because they believe there is value in having a local platform that focuses on what is good and what is useful and what is important. And I thought about the guests who were already on the calendar, the ones that I'd already recorded, and those interviews were now gone. I thought about everyone who'd already trusted me with their time and their stories. For a while, I didn't know if I still had the tools to keep doing that the way it needed to be done. And it was a really hard place to sit. You know, you can be determined, still be scared, and you can be committed and still not know what's coming next and believe in the work. And I still had to be honest enough to say, I don't know how I'm going to pull this off. It's where I was. I thought about quitting. I thought about giving up. And I also knew that moving on meant not pretending it was going to have an easy answer. There's a big difference between having resolve and having a plan. And during that stretch, I developed a resolve. The plan, I don't know, that was a moving target. Then something started to happen that changed the emotional direction of this story. It didn't immediately solve the practical problem and it didn't erase the stress, but it did change the feeling around the problem in a way that really mattered. People, you started reaching out. If you're looking for a laid-back spot with great food and even better company, it's the Mile Away on Old Lincoln Highway north of Council Bluffs. This family-run bar and grill is your go-to for mouth-watering wings, unbeatable weekly specials, and a welcoming atmosphere that feels like home. So, if you're catching a game, enjoying one of those specials, or just unwinding after a long day, the Mile Away has you covered. Open every day, Tuesday through Sunday at 8 for breakfast, and don't forget them at lunch and dinner time as well. It's the Mile Away, Old Lincoln Highway, north of Council Bluffs. Service Master Restore by Schmader knows it can be hard to get things back to normal when you've suffered serious property damage due to flooding, fire, or smoke. And that can oftentimes lead to mold, and you may be left with all sorts of questions about how to get your home or business back to normal. It's easy. You give Cindy Schmader a call with Service Master Restore by Schmader. Her phone number, 402-339-9911. I'm going to get emotional about this. Probably not the only time here. You know, once people started contacting me, I began to realize that the equipment, it was gone. And the thing I've been talking about all along, the thing that I believe makes Council Bluffs and Southwest Iowa special, the thing that actually matters most in a community, that was still here. The part of this story that I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life, it's the way people reached out. I was in the middle of something like this and I didn't know how anyone was going to respond. And then suddenly I did know because you did. You know, people care and understand. I hoped that the work meant enough that you'd notice something was threatening it. There's a big difference between hoping that support is there and actually watching all of you step forward. I saw it. I saw you reach out immediately. I put a post out inside of an hour after it happened, and immediately I started hearing from people, whether it was messages underneath the post or whether it was phone calls or text messages. People were asking, hey, what do you need? People offering help before we even knew exactly what that help was going to look like. People were saying, look, I've got some stuff that you can borrow. People were offering to make calls and offering money. I saw people that were sharing information and people keeping their eyes open, and people, they just stepped into this problem with me instead of watching it from a distance. I can't explain how much that means. I really can't. So I want to say this very clearly because it matters. The fact that all the equipment is now back in my possession and it doesn't erase what you were willing to do when none of us knew what was going to happen. The offer still matters, and your willingness to help still matters. The instinct that you had to help still matters. A lot of you were ready to help me get right back to work. Some of the folks, I've talked about it before, that I belong to Kabaya Lodge number 631 with the Masons in Council Bluffs. And right away, they were collecting checks, and they were ready to help me get cameras and a computer, just ready to get going again. I want you to think about that for just a minute here. They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to make my problem their problem. They saw a brother in need, and they said, all right, we're ready to act right now. So I got my equipment back, but that doesn't make their willingness to help any smaller. In some ways, the offer itself showed me something that I really needed to see in that moment. It showed me I wasn't standing alone. That mattered before I got everything back, because in those first few hours, I'm looking at the whole situation as if it's just mine to carry by myself, my business, my equipment, my problem, my uncertainty, my responsibility to figure it out. But all of you started showing up one way after another. And it reminded me that the whole reason that I believe in Council Bluffs and I believe in local community, it's because this is exactly what local community can do when people decide to care. It's not just a slogan. It's not just a nice phrase to put on a post, and it's not just something we say when we want to sound positive. Community is people deciding that someone else's problem matters enough. We're willing to take a step toward it instead of away from it. Sometimes that step is money. Sometimes it is offering equipment. A lot of this was a phone call, a message, just saying, hey, I see what happened and I care and I want to help if I can. That is what I saw. I saw it from a wide range of people. There were sponsors, friends, just viewers, business owners, people who've been part of these shows, people who believe in what local media can be, and people who simply just didn't want to see something bad stop something good. I don't want to turn this into a list where I accidentally leave someone out. So please, so many people reached out in so many different ways. I do want to let every person who sent a message or made a call or shared something or offered help or just said, keep going. I want you to know I saw it. I felt it. I needed it. And I think one of the reasons it's hitting me so deep, it's because I spend a lot of my time highlighting the good in this area. And I believe there is a lot of good here. And I believe there are people doing meaningful things here. I believe small businesses matter. I believe nonprofits matter and local stories matter. And I believe that when people are given the chance to see the good that is happening around them, it changes how we all feel about where we live. This time, I didn't just talk about it, I experienced it. And I watched all of you take the thing I talk about, turn it into action. So, when you're the person on the receiving end of that, it's humbling. It has strengthened me because after the shock and after the uncertainty and after that awful stretch of not knowing how I could possibly move forward, the messages and the offers started giving me a different thought to hold on to. Instead of just thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, I started thinking, there are people who are not going to let this go away, and they're not going to let it stop me. And that was a very powerful shift. It didn't mean everything was fixed, and it certainly didn't mean that I suddenly had all the answers, and it didn't mean the stress was gone, but it did mean that this story was no longer about just a theft and what had been taken from me. It became about what people are willing to do. And then in the middle of all of that, something happened. Changed this entire outcome. Man, I got to get through this. It brings me to a man by the name of Juan. Juan owns a restaurant in town called Juanito's, very close to Canesville and North 8th Street. You know where it is. He's got a green roof. You can't miss it. Now, what he did, I need to talk about this very clearly and very directly and with a whole lot of respect, because in the middle of this, Juan, he became not just a major part of the story. In my opinion, he became the story. I want to talk about this because it's important to recognize integrity when you see it. There's a lot of people, they say they would do the right thing, and we'll believe them that they'll do the right thing if the moment ever came. But the truth is, when something happens, that's when we really find out what people are made of, when there's a choice in front of them. Juan had a choice. He did the right thing. Now, from what I understand, the equipment came through. The people that were involved with the theft told him that this was something that they had gotten from an abandoned storage unit, and Juan paid $250 for everything that was taken. But when he realized what it was, and he told me the story that he pulled a memory card out of one of the cameras and put it into his computer and saw me. And he remembered me doing a show from inside of his restaurant. And he also told me I remembered that voice. So when he became aware that this wasn't right, he didn't look the other way. He didn't decide this is somebody else's problem. He didn't stay quiet because getting involved might have been inconvenient. He stepped up. He did everything the right way. And because of that, all of my equipment is back here in this studio. That is integrity. I don't use that word lightly. Integrity is not just what a person says about themselves. It is what a person does. When the easier option would have been to avoid the problem. It's what a person does when there's a chance to make something right. It's what a person does when nobody's forced them. There's still room to choose. Choosing correctly might take a little courage and might create some inconvenience, or might take a little bit of willingness to get involved. That is what I saw from Juan. So I want people to understand what that means. The equipment coming back, not just a personal relief. It absolutely was that, but the difference between being shut down and being able to work, and the difference between trying to rebuild from scratch and being able to get back to work right away. This was the difference between telling sponsors and guests, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. And I was able to say, yes, we're moving forward right now. Juan's actions made all of that possible. In a time when people get cynical and when people start to believe that nobody does the right thing anymore, I think it is worth stopping and saying, no, here's an example of someone doing the right thing when it mattered. Here is someone who could have looked the other way. He didn't. This is someone who could have decided the easiest path was to just stay out of it. He didn't. He made sure that I got everything back. That deserves to be recognized. You know, Juanito's has been one of those places, you've known about it for a couple of years. Great food. But now for me, it means something even more specific. It means someone was willing to step up in a real situation and make something right. And it means when all of my recording equipment that represented my livelihood, my shows, the commitments that I've made to Council Bluffs and the other communities in the area, it was in a place where it could have stayed gone, but someone chose, we're not going to let that happen. I am so deeply grateful for that. Council Bluffs today is brought to you by Keith Jones, your Edward Jones financial advisor in Council Bluffs. Learn how he can help you reach your financial goals. Visit edwardjones.com for more. Edward Jones, member SIPC. Technology should work for you, not against you. At ThinkSpace IT, they provide expert IT solutions to keep your business running smoothly and securely. From cybersecurity and cloud services to network management and tech support, they simplify IT so you can focus on what matters most. Stay protected, stay connected, stay ahead. Visit ThinkSpaceIT.com. There's also what I think is a bigger lesson here. Local businesses are not just places where we buy food or services or products. They're run by people. They're woven into this community and the other communities in our area. There's relationships, reputations, values, and responsibilities. So when a local business owner shows integrity, that reflects something larger than one transaction or one moment. It reminds us why local matters in the first place. We talk a lot about supporting local businesses, and usually when we say that, we mean spend money, eat there, shop there, hire them, use their services, keep dollars close to home. All of that is true, and all of it matters. But supporting local is also about recognizing the people behind those businesses when they show us who they really are. And Juan showed me who he is. I'm not going to forget it. I went from disbelief to uncertainty to being overwhelmed by the number of people willing to help to then getting information that all of the recording equipment had been found. It was all coming back. It's a lot to go through in about a 24-hour stretch. The emotional swing of that, I can't really describe it. You know, 1 hour I'm sitting wondering if everything is coming to an end, and the next I'm looking at a big stack of recording equipment and I'm thinking about, wow, I don't have to start over. So when I say the road back was fast, I don't mean that any of this is easy. And the stress, it's still here. You know, the theft has still left a mark. But what I do mean is that once people start doing the right thing, once a community starts moving, and once Juan stepped up, this story took a direction that I had no idea any of us would see. That's why I wanted to talk about this. And it's not because I want to relive the theft. Believe me, I don't. It's not because I want to make the whole story about what was taken, or it's because I think the recovery says something better about this community than the theft says about whoever took it. That theft was wrong. The response was powerful. One of the things that's happened since the equipment came back is that this story is going beyond just my own circle. Tonight, Katrina Markel from Channel 3, she's doing a story on this, scheduled to air on KMTV in Omaha. I was told at 6 o'clock. Very grateful for that, because I think this is the kind of story that deserves to be told in the right way. This is not a theft story. It's not just about a quick piece about equipment being stolen and then recovered. That's part of it. I'm not minimizing that. The theft itself was serious. It created real consequences. I still have a broken window. But it's not the whole story. The bigger story is what happened after. The bigger story is how quickly people stepped forward. The bigger story is that when something bad happened, the response from this community was stronger than the act that caused the harm. That is what I want people to take away from this. It'd be very easy for me to sit here, talk about anger and talk about the violation of having something taken and the fear of not knowing what comes next and the frustration of having to deal with this. Well, I was already working, trying to keep my head above water with everything that was already going on. I was exhausted. I shouldn't have had to solve this problem, but all of those feelings, they're very real. I'm not going to pretend they weren't. But the worst part of this story is not the only part of the story, and it's not the best part of the story. Because if that's all I focus on, then I'm missing everything about what happened. That is the part that deserves to be in the spotlight. You helped. You offered. You cared. Everything came back. Juan at Juanito's restaurant in Council Bluffs showed what real integrity is. My lodge, my friends, my sponsors, my viewers, business owners, people everywhere throughout the community ready to help. And I'm sitting here in this room again, and I've got everything back. And that matters more to me than I can ever fully explain. There was a point in those first 24 hours, I didn't know how quickly that was going to happen or if it was going to happen. I didn't know if I'd be able to keep doing this work. Could I keep serving sponsors and guests? I didn't know. But I'm sitting here in the studio. I don't take that for granted. So when you go through something like this, there is a temptation to rush back into work and act like everything's normal, because that's what business owners do a lot of the times. Something happens, you deal with it, you get back to work, and you move on because the work still needs to get done. And I understand that instinct, part of me has that instinct too, and that's what's going to happen, but I don't want to move on so quickly that I don't acknowledge what all of you did. This is not only about recovering recording equipment. It was about being reminded that the work I do here, it has developed roots in the community, and those roots are deeper, I think, than I realized. So when you reached out, I wasn't just hearing you say that you cared about cameras and computers. You were saying you cared about the work and about the shows and about the local voices. You cared about the idea that Council Bluffs and the surrounding communities deserve a place where good things are talked about and where local businesses are highlighted, where organizations can explain what they're doing and what people can hear from their neighbors in a way that feels real. And that is what I heard in every one of your offers to help. So I'm not coming out of this discouraged. I'm tired, I'm shaken, I'm frustrated, but I'm not discouraged. If anything, all of this has shown me that the thing that I've been trying to build is not just something that I care about, others do too. When it was threatened, you responded. So to everyone who reached out, thank you. To everyone who offered help, thank you. To my lodge, Kabaya, lodge number 631 with the Masons, thank you for being willing to step up in such a meaningful way. And to Juan at Juanito's, thank you for showing the kind of integrity that deserves to be recognized publicly. Also, thanks, Katrina Markel. She called me just to check on me. Thank you for taking the time to help tell this story. And to everyone who watches, shares, supports, all the sponsors have been on the show, or anyone who just believes that positive local media still matters. Thank you. I wasn't expecting that this was going to be a story I'd be telling this week, but it is a story that happened. And because of the way that all of you responded, it's not just a story about theft. It's a story about recovery and a story about community and a story about people doing the right thing and about being knocked down, looking around, realizing there's a lot more hands reaching out than I ever would have expected. So that is what makes this road back quick. I'm grateful to be back in the studio. I'm grateful that this story, as difficult as it has been, is showing me something that's worth believing in. This is Council Bluffs Today. My name's Todd Studer, and you're damn right. I'll see you tomorrow.